For years, I was their dutiful daughter, their financial cushion. But for my one vacation, my parents pleaded poverty. Then, at the airport, I saw them, and my sister's family, boarding first class. Laura wouldn't appreciate this luxury anyway, my mother scoffed. I stayed silent, but the plan I set in motion during my tear-soaked flight meant their betrayal would cost them everything. The old photo albums felt heavier than they looked, each one a brick in the wall of my past. A past I was now meticulously dismantling. My fingers, trembling ever so slightly, brushed against a faded picture of a much younger me, beaming beside my sister, Chloe, at one of her many birthday parties. Even then, Chloe was the one bathed in the camera's flash, while I stood slightly to the side, a supporting act in her lifelong play. It was a role I'd played for 39 years, the dutiful daughter, the reliable sister, the unseen cog that kept the family machine whirring smoothly, until the machine tried to grind me into dust. My name is Laura, and for as long as I can remember, I was the fixer, the one who smoothed over financial shortfalls, mediated parental squabbles, and put my own dreams on a dusty shelf marked later. Later, I was learning, often meant never. The sacrifices began subtly, insidious weeds in the garden of familial obligation. When Chloe decided her wedding needed hand-calligraphed invitations from a boutique stationer and a specific, outrageously priced designer gown, it was my savings for a condo down payment that magically made it happen. "You're such a good sister, Laura," Chloe had chirped, her eyes sparkling, oblivious to the quiet crumbling of my own aspirations. "It's just what family does. Mother," Eleanor would add, patting my hand, her expensive perfume, a scent I associated with impending requests, enveloping me. That phrase, "it's what family does," became the soundtrack to my diminishing bank account. Then there were my parents' unexpected bills. The new roof after a storm that somehow only damaged their house in a neighborhood of pristine homes. The emergency replacement of their barely used luxury sedan's transmission. My father, Robert, would look suitably grave, while Eleanor would sigh dramatically, her hand fluttering to her chest. And I, fresh from a promotion or a bonus I'd worked tirelessly for, would write the check. I told myself it was fine. I was single, no children, fewer expenses than Chloe with her husband, Mark, and their 2 children, Lily and Tom. My parents, on the other hand, had a lifestyle to maintain, a facade of effortless middle-class comfort that I was beginning to realize was largely underwritten by me. One of the keenest sacrifices still stung. Years ago, a fantastic job opportunity had come my way, a significant promotion, a chance to lead a team, but it required relocating to Chicago. I was ecstatic. Then came Eleanor's health scare. Vague symptoms, dramatic pronouncements of needing her daughters close. Chloe, of course, was too busy with her precious babies. So, I declined the offer. The day I emailed my refusal, Eleanor's mysterious ailment vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Coincidence, she'd claimed, smiling benignly. I'd swallowed the bitter pill of disappointment, telling myself, once again, it was for family. Through it all, one dream persisted. A trip to Hawaii for my 40th birthday. It wasn't just about the beaches or the volcanoes. It was a pilgrimage to a version of myself I'd yet to meet, one who prioritized her own joy. I'd saved meticulously for years, a secret fund, a tiny rebellion against the constant erosion of my resources. This trip was to be mine, wholly and unequivocally. The family dynamic was as predictable as the changing seasons. Chloe was the golden child, her every minor achievement lauded, her life a curated reel of perfect moments endlessly narrated by Eleanor. Her children, my niece and nephew, were extensions of this perfection, doted upon, their futures seemingly paved with gold. And I was Laura, the responsible one, the one who didn't ask for much, the one whose contributions were as expected and as unremarked upon as the sunrise. I remember one particular conversation a few years back about a significant sum of money. My father's small consulting business was supposedly struggling. He'd spoken of a make-or-break investment opportunity a chance to turn things around. With a heavy heart, I'd liquidated a considerable portion of my own investments, money I'd earmarked for that perpetually postponed condo, and given it to him. "This will save us, Laura," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. Later, he told me the venture had unfortunately failed, my money lost. He looked so defeated, so genuinely heartbroken, that I hadn't the heart to press for details. I'd simply absorbed the loss, another sacrifice laid at the altar of family. It was a memory that now, in the harsh light of recent events, began to prickle with unease. As my 40th birthday approached, my Hawaii fund had finally reached its target. I was brimming with a nervous excitement I hadn't felt in years. I decided, perhaps naively, to share my news with my parents, hoping for a flicker of shared joy, a moment where my happiness might take center stage. I found them in the sunroom, Eleanor tending to her orchids, Robert reading the paper. So, I began, trying to sound casual, "I've been planning something special for my big birthday. I'm going to Hawaii." Eleanor paused, her orchid shears glinting. She exchanged a look with Robert, then turned back to me, her lips pursed. "Oh, Laura dear," she began, the familiar prelude to disappointment. "Hawaii? That sounds incredibly expensive." She sighed, a masterpiece of maternal concern. "And frankly, with your father's medical deductible being so high this year after that little scare he had, we were rather hoping you might be able to help us out. Just a bit. Besides," she added, as if it were an afterthought, "Chloe was just saying they desperately need a new, safer minivan for the children. Theirs is getting so old, you know. We're trying to see how we can support that important purchase." Robert folded his newspaper, his expression a careful blend of apology and paternal gravity. "Your mother's right, Laura. Timing is a bit off for such extravagances." The air in the sunroom grew heavy with unspoken expectations. My excitement shriveled. It wasn't just the lack of enthusiasm. It was the immediate pivot to their needs, to Chloe's needs. The familiar chill of being an afterthought, a resource rather than a daughter, settled deep in my bones. My carefully constructed smile felt like a mask, hardening with each passing second. "I see," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "Well, it was just an idea." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. Years of conditioning had taught me the futility of it. But as I walked away from them that day, a tiny, defiant spark ignited within me. This time, I wouldn't shelve my dream. That evening, alone in my quiet apartment, I booked the flights and the hotel for my Hawaiian adventure. I used my own hard-earned money, every single cent, and I told no one in my family. It was my first truly selfish act in a lifetime of selflessness. Or so I thought. The weeks leading up to my departure were a strange mix of clandestine excitement and a low hum of anxiety. I meticulously planned my itinerary, poring over guidebooks and travel blogs, the anticipation a warm current beneath the surface of my everyday life. I imagined the scent of plumeria, the warmth of the Pacific sun on my skin, the taste of fresh pineapple. It was an escape I desperately needed, not just from my routine, but from the suffocating weight of my family's expectations. The day of my flight, I arrived at the airport early, a knot of nerves and exhilaration tightening in my stomach. I checked my one sensible suitcase, a stark contrast to the mountains of luggage I'd often helped Chloe manage for her family vacations, vacations I'd frequently subsidized. As I stood in the predictably long economy boarding line, the stale airport air thick with the scent of jet fuel and fast food, I allowed myself a small smile. I was doing this for me. Then I heard it, a laugh so familiar, so distinct in its slightly shrill, attention-grabbing quality that my blood ran cold. "Chloe." I turned my head slowly, a dreadful premonition coiling in my gut. And there they were, not 20 feet away, gliding towards the velvet rope of the first-class priority boarding line. Eleanor, Robert, Chloe, her husband Mark, and my niece and nephew, Lily and Tom. They were a vision of coordinated vacation chic, dressed in new, matching linen outfits in a cheerful shade of seafoam green. My carefully hoarded dream of Hawaii was, apparently, a shared family experience, just not with me. My breath hitched. My carry-on bag slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the linoleum floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo the collapse of something deep inside me. They hadn't seen me. They were too engrossed in their privileged bubble, laughing and chattering, radiating an aura of untroubled entitlement. Then, Eleanor's voice, carrying clearly across the bustling terminal, delivered the killing blow. "Oh, I still feel a bit guilty we couldn't help Laura with her little trip," she said to Chloe, her tone dripping with faux concern. "But she's so simple." She paused, as if searching for the right dismissive word. "She wouldn't appreciate this luxury anyway, dear. Probably prefers those budget hostels. You know how she is with money." Chloe scoffed, a sound of pure, unadulterated disdain. "Honestly, Mom, she wouldn't fit in with this crowd. Can you imagine?" They both laughed, a light, tinkling sound that felt like shards of ice piercing my heart. Each note was a testament to years of casual cruelty, of being perpetually underestimated and undervalued. Robert, my father, simply beamed at his grandchildren, his face a mask of benign indulgence, utterly complicit in their casual dismissal of his other daughter. I think I stopped breathing for a moment. The sounds of the airport faded to a dull roar. My mother's words, "she wouldn't fit in," echoed in the sudden, stark silence of my mind. It wasn't just about the money or the lie, or even the vacation itself. It was the breathtaking contempt, the casual stripping away of my worth, the realization that to them, I wasn't just less important, I was fundamentally less. My first instinct was to march over there, to unleash the torrent of hurt and anger palavras that was choking me. But what would have been the point? Their expressions, their laughter, had already told me everything I needed to know. Instead, I bent down, picked up my bag, and turned away, my movements stiff, robotic. I blended back into the anonymous queue, a ghost at their feast. My face was burning, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. As I shuffled forward with the other economy passengers, I felt their oblivious, joyful energy radiating from the first-class line like a cruel mockery. The flight to Hawaii was 7 hours of torment. I stared blankly at the seat back in front of me, the in-flight movie a meaningless blur of light and sound. The carefully constructed dam of my composure had shattered, and silent tears streamed down my face, unnoticed in the darkened cabin. Eleanor's words replayed endlessly, each repetition twisting the knife a little deeper. Simple. Wouldn't appreciate luxury. Wouldn't fit in. It was on that tear-soaked flight, somewhere over the vast, indifferent Pacific, that the hurt began to crystallize into something else. A cold, hard anger. A chilling clarity. This wasn't just a slight. It was a profound betrayal, the culmination of a lifetime of being their emotional and financial punching bag. And in that moment of painful illumination, a new resolve took root. They had drawn their line in the sand. Now I would draw mine. The initial seeds of a plan, a way to reclaim not just my money, but my dignity, began to form. My arrival in Hawaii was bittersweet. The island was as beautiful as I dreamed. The air soft and fragrant, the colors vibrant. But the joy I'd anticipated was muted, overshadowed by the raw wound of my family's deception. I walked the beaches, the volcanic sand cool beneath my feet, and saw not beauty, but a reflection of my own isolation. The scent of plumeria, which I'd imagined would be intoxicating, now seemed cloying, mixed with the bitter taste of their betrayal. The stunning sunsets felt like they were mocking my solitude. During those first few days, when I wasn't numbly going through the motions of my planned excursions, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. Thinking critically about my family's finances, specifically my father's. The failed business venture, the one that had swallowed a significant chunk of my savings. I started to research it online during the quiet, lonely evenings at my hotel room. I scoured old local news archives, business registries, anything I could find, and inconsistencies began to emerge. Timelines that didn't quite match his story. Vague details that now seemed suspiciously opaque. A seed of doubt, planted years ago and long dormant, began to sprout. One afternoon, determined to salvage something of my trip, My dream, I did something utterly out of character. I booked a private surfing lesson. It was expensive, an indulgence I would have previously dismissed as frivolous. But as I stood, wobbling on that board, the Hawaiian sun on my face, the salt spray in my hair, and finally caught a small wave, a flicker of genuine joy, pure and unadulterated, broke through the fog of my pain. It was a small act of self-reclamation, a defiant assertion of my own worth. That evening, feeling a renewed sense of purpose, I drafted an email to my best friend, Sarah. I kept it vague, just mentioning a serious family issue I needed to discuss upon my return. Then I did something bolder. I'd always remembered my maternal grandmother speaking fondly of her old family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man she described as having unimpeachable integrity. A quick search online yielded a semi-retired Mr. Alastair Henderson, still practicing part-time. I composed a careful, professional email, introducing myself as Eleanor's daughter and her mother's granddaughter, and requested a consultation regarding a sensitive family financial matter upon my return to the mainland. Clicking send on that email felt like taking my first real step on a solid ground. The Laura who boarded that plane in Hawaii would not be the same Laura who had departed, heartbroken and betrayed. I returned from Hawaii with a tan on my skin and a core of ice in my heart. The vibrant greens and blues of the islands were a stark contrast to the gray resolve that had settled over me. I didn't call my family. I didn't text. The silence stretched, a new and unfamiliar dynamic. It used to be me, reaching out, checking in, smoothing feathers. Now I waited. It didn't take long. 3 days after my return, my phone rang. Eleanor. Her voice was artificially bright, overly cheerful. Laura, darling, how was your little break? We missed you. Listen, she trilled, the casual pivot already beginning. The property tax bill just arrived. Quite a shocker this year. And your father and I were just wondering if you could possibly see your way to... No, I said. My voice was calm, steady, devoid of the tremor she usually elicited. Silence crackled on the line. I could almost hear her processing this unprecedented response. No, she finally repeated, incredulity lacing her tone. No, Mother, I reiterated. I will not be covering your expenses anymore. But Laura, she began, her voice starting to wobble, the guilt trip engine revving up. You don't understand, things are a bit tight, and my heart has been doing that funny, fluttering thing again. Then I suggest you see a doctor, I said, my tone still even. I have to go now. I ended the call before she could launch into a full-blown dramatic performance. My hand was shaking, but a strange sense of liberation washed over me. The next salvo came from Chloe, predictably furious. What on earth did you say to Mom? She shrieked in the phone an hour later. No preamble, no hello. She's a wreck. How dare you upset her like that? You're just jealous because we had a nice family vacation and you didn't. Jealous, Chloe? I asked, a humorless laugh escaping me. No, enlightened might be a better word. By the way, how was first class? Did Lily and Tom enjoy the extra legroom their Aunt Laura couldn't afford? A choked sound came from her end. You saw us? Oh, I saw you. I confirmed, my voice like chipped ice. And heard you. Simple Laura wouldn't appreciate the luxury. Isn't that what Mother said? Chloe sputtered, then resorted to her usual tactic, insult. You're being petty and vindictive. You've always been jealous of me. The only thing I'm jealous of, Chloe, I said, my patience finally snapping, is the breathtaking audacity of your collective delusion. But that particular show is over. Consider my ATM permanently closed. I hung up, my heart pounding a wild rhythm against my ribs. That evening, I met Sarah for dinner. As I recounted the airport scene and my subsequent decision, her expression shifted from shock to a fierce, protective anger on my behalf. Oh, Laura, she said, reaching across the table to grip my hand. It's about damn time. I've been telling you for years they were taking advantage of you, but you were never ready to see it. Sarah, a survivor of her own toxic family dynamic, understood the insidious nature of familial manipulation better than anyone. This is just the beginning of their tantrum, though, she warned. They'll try everything to pull you back in. Guilt, intimidation, feigned illnesses. Don't you dare back down. Her unwavering support was the lifeline I desperately needed. A few days later, the expected summons arrived, a family dinner at my parents' house to talk things through. I knew it was an ambush. Before I even considered accepting, I had my consultation with Mr. Henderson. He was a man in his late 70s, with kind eyes and a sharp mind that belied his age. I laid out my story, including my suspicions about my father's failed business and the research I'd done. He listened patiently, occasionally jotting down notes. He remembered my grandmother well. Your grandmother, Catherine, was a woman of great integrity and astute financial sense, he said, a thoughtful expression on his face. She was cautious about Robert's financial judgment, even back then. He agreed to do some preliminary, discreet digging into the business records and the large sum I'd invested. Armed with this emerging alliance, I went to the family dinner. The atmosphere in my parents' living room was thick with tension. Eleanor, Robert, and Chloe were arranged like a tribunal. Mark, Chloe's husband, hovered awkwardly near the fireplace, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The onslaught began immediately. Eleanor, dabbing at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief, lamented my cruelty and ingratitude. Robert mumbled about family loyalty. Chloe accused me of trying to destroy the family out of bitterness. It was a masterclass in gaslighting and emotional blackmail. After all we've done for you, Eleanor wailed, conveniently forgetting that the doing had predominantly flowed in the opposite direction. For a moment, the sheer force of their united condemnation, the familiar script I'd been programmed to obey, made me almost doubt myself. I glanced out the window at the rose garden Eleanor had once cherished. It was now overgrown with weeds, a few withered blooms drooping like unwept tears, a poignant mirror to the decay within our family. Then, I remembered Sarah's words, Mr. Henderson's quiet dignity, and the cold, hard clarity I'd found in Hawaii. I took a deep breath. Let me be clear. I began, my voice surprisingly steady. This isn't about bitterness. It's about truth. I calmly recounted my years of financial contributions, their casual dismissal of my Hawaii trip, and then, in meticulous detail, I described the scene at the airport, what I saw, what I heard. They tried to deny it, of course. You misunderstood. Eleanor cried. We were just joking. It was a silly comment. Chloe insisted. As their denials reached a crescendo, my phone buzzed. A prearranged signal. It was an email from Mr. Henderson's office. I opened on my phone, my hand steady. Actually, I said, cutting through their clamor, I think I understood perfectly. I looked directly at my father. You told me the money I invested in your business, my entire savings at the time, was lost because the venture failed. Robert shifted uneasily. It was a difficult time, Laura. Unforeseen circumstances. Unforeseen like a secret trust fund for Chloe's children. I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I turned my phone screen towards them, displaying the preliminary findings from Mr. Henderson. Bank records showing large, unexplained transfers from Robert's business accounts around the time of my investment, funneling into an account that eventually seeded a substantial trust. Mr. Henderson is still tracing the final destination of all of it, but the initial trail is quite clear. A significant portion of my money didn't vanish into a failed business, Dad. It was siphoned, diverted. The room fell into a stunned silence. Robert's face went ashen. Eleanor stared, speechless, her feigned tears forgotten. Chloe looked from me to her father, a horrified understanding dawning on her face. Even Mark seemed to straighten up, his gaze fixed on Robert with a new, sharp intensity. So, it wasn't a failed business, Dad. I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. It was a successful theft. From me, your daughter. The power dynamic in the room had irrevocably, seismically shifted. The immediate aftermath of the revelation was chaotic. Robert stammered incoherent denials. Eleanor, recovering her voice, switched tactics from wounded mother to outraged matriarch, accusing me of hiring lawyers to destroy her family. Chloe, for once, was silent, her usual glib comebacks failing her as she stared at her father with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Perhaps she hadn't known the full extent of this particular deception. Mark, however, found his voice. "Robert," he said, his tone cold and clipped, "is this true? Did you take Laura's money to fund a trust for our kids?" His question hung in the air, unanswered but damning. In the days that followed, the battle lines were drawn more sharply. Chloe, recovering from her initial shock, seemed to double down on her allegiance to our parents, or perhaps to the lifestyle my money had inadvertently helped maintain. She launched a subtle smear campaign amongst extended family and mutual acquaintances, painting me as a bitter, vengeful spinster trying to extort money from her loving, elderly parents. "Laura's always been difficult," I heard she'd told our cousin Susan. "She's just having some sort of breakdown." The words stung, but they also solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative. Then came Eleanor's predictable escalation. She called me, her voice weak and breathy, claiming to be suffering from a severe high blood pressure episode, directly blaming my stressful accusations. "The doctor says I need complete rest. And you know Chloe is overwhelmed with the children," she wheezed. "I need you, Laura." It was the old script, the one designed to pull me back into the role of caretaker. But this time I didn't fall for it. Advised by Sarah, who'd seen similar tactics, I responded calmly. "I'm sorry to hear you're unwell, Mother. I can call a home health aid service for a consultation if you'd like. I'm sure Chloe can manage until they arrive." I did not offer to come myself. The silence on her end was telling, followed by a frustrated sigh and a click as she hung up. My boundaries, newly forged, were holding. Mark, Chloe's husband, was becoming an interesting wild card. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that the tension in their house was palpable. He was reportedly furious with Chloe for her blind defense of her parents and increasingly worried about the financial implications for his own family if I pursued legal action to recoup the siphoned funds. "This is your parents' mess, Chloe, not ours," he'd allegedly yelled during one argument. The perfect facade of Chloe's family was beginning to crack. Then, about 2 weeks after the disastrous family dinner, a registered package arrived. It was from the executor of my Aunt Carol's estate. Aunt Carol, my father's estranged sister, had passed away a month prior. We hadn't been close, my parents had ensured that, but she'd always sent me birthday card with kind, if brief, messages. I opened the package with a sense of trepidation. Inside, nestled amongst some legal documents pertaining to a modest bequest she'd left me, was a thick envelope addressed to me in Carol's spidery handwriting. It was a letter, pages long, written shortly before her death. As I read it, tears streamed down my face, but this time they were tears of profound, aching validation. Aunt Carol wrote of her own painful experiences with Robert and Eleanor, their duplicity, their financial manipulations, their emotional blackmail. She detailed why she had distanced herself, not out of indifference, but out of self-preservation. She'd seen how they treated me, how they favored Chloe, and her heart had ached for the quiet, overlooked niece she barely knew. But there was more. Tucked within her letter were photocopies of old financial statements, and even a few letters exchanged between her and my grandmother, Catherine. These documents painted a devastatingly clear picture of my father's long-standing pattern of financial irresponsibility and Eleanor's willing complicity. One particular document, a copy of a terse letter from my grandmother to Robert, explicitly stated she was cutting off further financial assistance due to his reckless handling of funds and endless demands. This, I realized with a jolt, was likely why they had become so dependent on me. And then, the final, damning piece of evidence, a copy of a birthday card Robert had sent to Aunt Carol years ago, around the time of my investment in his business. On the back, in his own handwriting, was a scribbled, boastful note. Finally got the business back on track, and even managed to set up a clever little nest egg for Chloe's kids. Eleanor is thrilled. Laura's contribution was a godsend, though she thinks it all went belly up. Better she doesn't know the details. It was a smoking gun. My father's own words, condemning him. Mr. Henderson was astounded when I showed him. This is extraordinary, Laura," he said, his usual composure momentarily shaken. Aunt Carol has given you more than just validation. She's given you irrefutable proof. The modest inheritance from Aunt Carol was a welcome surprise. But her true gift was this undeniable truth, this unexpected alliance from beyond the grave. It swept away any lingering vestiges of guilt or self-doubt. My fight was not just my own. It was for Aunt Carol, for my grandmother, for the quiet integrity they had embodied. Armed with Aunt Carol's devastating evidence and Mr. Henderson's meticulous legal groundwork, the next step was clear. We didn't just have a strong moral case. We had an airtight legal one. Mr. Henderson drafted a formal letter of demand, sent via registered mail to my parents and copied to Chloe and Mark. It laid out, in unequivocal terms, the evidence of the misappropriated funds, my investment, the siphon amounts, the clear intent to defraud, and demanded full repayment of the principal sum plus accrued interest within 30 days. The alternative, the letter stated plainly, was the initiation of civil proceedings for fraud, and given the paper trail, we would also consider reporting the matter to the relevant financial authorities. The reaction was, as expected, panicked. The carefully constructed world of Eleanor, Robert, and Chloe began to implode. The first call was from my father, his voice raspy, stripped of its usual bluster. He pleaded for a meeting, for understanding. I referred him to Mr. Henderson. Then came Eleanor, alternating between tearful apologies. I never meant for any of this to happen, Laura. You must believe me. It was all Robert's idea. And veiled threats about my destroying her health. I listened, unmoved, and again referred her to my lawyer. Chloe's response was a furious, incoherent voicemail message, accusing me of being a heartless monster and tearing the family apart for money. There was a new edge of desperation in her voice, though. The bravado was gone. Mr. Henderson handled the negotiations with steely professionalism. They tried to offer a paltry sum, a fraction of what was owed, citing their limited means. He countered with the evidence of their comfortable lifestyle, the first-class trip to Hawaii, the secret trust fund. He made it clear that their attempts to portray themselves as victims would not work. The cracks in Chloe's marriage to Mark widened into a chasm. We learned through back channels that Mark, horrified by the depth of his in-laws' deceit and the very real threat to his own family's financial stability, had consulted his own lawyer. He was, reportedly, pushing Chloe hard to cooperate and force her parents to settle, lest their shared assets become entangled in a protracted and messy legal battle. The arguments in their oversized house became legendary in their social circle. To meet my demands and avoid public court proceedings, sacrifices had to be made by them. Eleanor and Robert were forced to sell their beloved family home, the one filled with memories, many of them, for me, tainted, and downsized to a small, unglamorous rental apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. The proceeds from the sale, after clearing their mortgage, went almost entirely to repaying me. Chloe and Mark, too, faced a reckoning. To contribute their share, as some of the trust fund had already been spent on lavish vacations and extras for their children, they had to sell their own large, heavily mortgaged house and move into a much more modest townhouse. The matching linen outfits and first-class upgrades were a distant memory. Their carefully curated image of effortless affluence shattered. The smiles, as I'd almost prophetically envisioned on that flight from Hawaii, had indeed vanished. One afternoon, about a month after the settlement was finalized and the funds transferred to my account, Chloe appeared unannounced at my apartment door. She looked ragged, her expensive clothes rumpled, dark circles under her eyes. She didn't try to push her way in, just stood on the threshold, a strange mixture of defiance and defeat in her eyes. "Are you happy now, Laura?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "You got what you wanted. You've ruined us." I looked at her, my sister, a virtual stranger now. There was no triumph in me, no desire to gloat, just a profound sadness for what we could have been and a quiet strength in what I had become. "I didn't want to ruin anyone, Chloe," I said, my voice even. "I just wanted what was mine. I wanted the truth. You and Mom and Dad made choices. These are the consequences." I paused, then added, This is the last time you'll come to my home. Goodbye, Chloe. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, but firmly, a final quiet severance. Later that day, I blocked her number and my parents' numbers on my phone. I changed the locks on my apartment. It was over. The months that followed were about rebuilding, not just my finances, but my life, my spirit. I started therapy, working through years of ingrained guilt and diminished self-worth. Sarah was my rock, my chosen sister, celebrating every small victory with me. With her encouragement, I began to explore hobbies I'd long put aside: pottery, hiking, learning to play the guitar. My small apartment, once just a place to sleep, began to feel like a home, filled with my own choices, my own energy. The little rose bush I'd planted in a pot on my tiny balcony, once as neglected as my spirit, began to thrive under my care, its vibrant blooms a daily reminder of resilience and new growth. A year later, life looked very different. I used a portion of the recouped money, along with Aunt Carol's modest but deeply meaningful inheritance, to take a risk I'd never have dared to before. I started my own small online business, crafting artisanal jams and preserves from locally sourced fruits, a passion I'd nurtured in private for years. It was challenging, demanding, but it was mine. The quiet satisfaction of building something from scratch, on my own terms, was immense. My little business began to show a small but steady profit, a testament to my hard work and reclaimed confidence. I was my own boss, in every sense of the word. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets about my former family through the grapevine. Eleanor and Robert were living a quiet, significantly reduced life. Their social standing had plummeted once the truth of their financial dealings became known in their circle. Chloe and Mark, I heard, had eventually divorced. The strain of the financial fallout, coupled with the revelations about her family's character, had proven too much for their marriage. Chloe was reportedly struggling, working a retail job to make ends meet. There was no malice in my reception of this news, no sense of vindictive pleasure, just a quiet acknowledgement of cause and effect, of choices and their inevitable, unsparing consequences. They had made their bed. I learned that true family doesn't demand your diminishment for their comfort. They don't measure your worth in dollars and cents or in your willingness to be erased. True family uplifts, supports, and cherishes. I found that family in Sarah, in the memory of Aunt Carol and my grandmother, and most importantly, within myself. They try to make me small so they could feel big. They try to define me by their limited, self-serving expectations. But I learned that my worth isn't determined by their approval or by anyone else's. It's forged in my own resilience, my own truth, my own courage to choose myself, even when it was the hardest choice of all. And that freedom, that hard-won peace, it's priceless. What chains? I often wonder now, are you the person listening to my story, ready to break today? What truth are you ready to speak, even if your voice trembles? Your own liberation might be just one brave decision away.